Jesus was more community, heart focused, like compassion. And you've got Buddha, who is more the individual quest of inner stillness. And then you have Lao Tzu, which is like this weaving of the 10,000 things and finding a way to stay in the neutral space as life unfolds. And I
Yeah.
feel like for me, it's all three. You know, how do you embody heart opened wisdom to your neighbor and to your community? How do you find the inner stillness? And then how do you walk through the world in a Taoist way where, you know, your response to stimulus is neutral? You know,
Yeah.
I think it's good that you go through all the different philosophies because I think there's a piece of mysticism for each of us.
There's a lot of mystics on the internet. Shout out and much love, you crazy fools, that could use dusting off a textbook or two warmly, without judgment. And secondarily, there are certainly a lot of scholars in academia who would be well served by eating a mushroom. So I'm trying to bridge those two worlds. I'm Bob Peck, and this is Karmic Relief.
My background is in documentary film and comparative religion. I wrote a book called Original Sin is a Lie: How Spirituality Defies Dogma and Reveals Our True Self.
It's an interview show where I talk to spiritual teachers, activists, scholars, people that live within these traditions and also appreciate the overlap. What happens when you start to get activated internally, that makes you activated in a compassionate way in the world. I'm thrilled to be talking to fantastic, inspiring human beings. I have to do much less work, which is nice because I'm just asking them questions about their story. It's a life hack.
Hi.
I hope you'll enjoy these explorations, these really excavations. In the ones I've filmed so far, they've all been really beautiful and deep and lighthearted. So please enjoy Karmic Relief. I'm Bob Peck. I wrote Original Sin is a Lie, and now I'm asking a bunch of questions to intelligent, compassionate humans.
Dylan Townsend is calling it out. The world of spiritual satire seems to be growing every day. My feeds are fed by jokes about the world of spirituality and New Age, and look, I'm all for a good laugh, but if you're gonna come for spiritualgram, you better have come out of the jungle, baby. You better be able to connect Padmasambhava's teachings to Carl Jung's psychoanalysis. You better read the stars like a fortune cookie. And Dylan Townsend is just that. He left his home in Ireland for India to learn yoga at 19 years old. He went to Venezuela to get to know plant medicine at 20. He's been all over this planet to learn and study under different spiritual traditions, and it is all culminating in his work in writing and film production on multiple new series headed for streamers soon. We cover a lot of ground. The interview starts with me contextualizing my book for a hot second. Thank you. Enjoy.
Well, the premise is it's like intro to mystic philosophy, basically, is kind of how I describe it. It covers a wide variety of things in terms of deconstruction is kind of the big hot term, right, around Christianity and like post-Christian stuff. Essentially, what I'm doing is like Bible scholarship 101 in the first like 70, 80 pages of saying like, hey, the Bible isn't infallible. It's actually very human. And this is the Bible scholars that have retraced, you know, we know when they wrote Mark, we know, and that was that community. We know Luke, Matthew, John, to all these different communities. Paul's letters are hit or miss. You know, I kind of just go through, which it kind of, in retrospect, like, I feel like there's people that probably like started reading and they're like, oh, I don't want to read about the Bible this whole time. But it's only about 70 or 80 pages about the Bible. Then it's kind of Hindu metaphysics and foundational spiritual practices, Buddhism and kind of present moment, and then like psychedelia. And kind of towards the end is like non-duality, of course, in Miracles, Advaita, kind of just the the spiritual buffet line, if you will.
I'm just super intrigued as to which of the Bibles you think are authentic. And like, and because for me, I actually love a book that really delves deep into the mythology and how they were instructed. Because for me, a lot of which Bible, like which is the truth? Where is the truth? Mary Magdalene comes into it. It's just, for me, what is the most authentic Bible for you?
Yeah, in my view, essentially what happens is, Jesus is an avatar. I'm comfortable with that language, right? I'm sure you are too, in your Eastern appreciation. That's what Yogananda calls him. That's what a lot of high mystics refer to him, and I'm comfortable with that. There's a handful of essentially veil breaker human beings, right? People who transcend birth and death, and they speak from this level of pure unconditional love and just present awareness, infinity, eternality, and no ego, just complete compassion. And that's what he did. And the disciples weren't there. They were there physically, but they weren't on the level that he was at, right? And then the New Testament books, which they say they're by Matthew or whatever, it's like, but Matthew, they in scholarship they say the Matthean author. Like it's very, very unlikely that the Apostle Matthew is the guy who wrote the Gospel according to Matthew. It was like decades, around 40 years after his death. Is Matthew's around 75,
So he's probably dead. Yeah,
he was, it's like it's two generations. There was about 30, 40 years of oral tradition in between his death and the writing of the Gospels. And so what happens is it's a telephone already, actually. And what happens too is Jesus spoke Aramaic and the Gospels are written in Greek. So people talk about translations and stuff. It was the first version is a translation. So they're not
interpreted the whole way, exactly.
the whole time. So there's essentially it's just not very good record keeping of what he said. And so in my view, the way I kind of interpret that is just to say, like, here's what he meant by the, when you lean into the scholarship of it and when you lean into the mystical experience and the spiritual understanding of it, that's how I believe you can get as close as possible to it. But there's other stuff that's later that, like, what scholars do is they'll say, if it's only in one of the four Gospels, it's probably an invention of that author. They kind of have this deductive reasoning process.
Yeah, which actually is not, I understand that.
It's also not perfect, but
yeah, but it's an imperfect analysis. But yeah, I think the main thing is the message of, Lao Tzu and Milarepa and Buddha and for me, like, Jesus was more community, heart focused, like compassion, and you've got Buddha who is more the individual quest of inner stillness, and then you have Lao Tzu, which is like this weaving of the 10,000 things and finding a way to stay in the neutral space as life unfolds. And I feel like for me, it's all three. How do you embody heart-opened wisdom to your neighbor and to your community? How do you find the inner stillness? And then how do you walk through the world in a Taoist way where, your response to stimulus is neutral? And I think it's good that you go through all the different philosophies, because I think there's a piece of mysticism for each of us. Yeah.
Beautifully put. Yeah, those are three greats. Krishna is on my altar as well. He's up there for me. But I, deep bow to those all those masters. And you just mentioned Milarepa, which is insane that you just mentioned that, because I'm literally finishing this book.
Wow.
This
not many people know about Milarepa, and I bring him up regularly because he's the poet of the Buddhist kingdom, and he's like the artist. And okay, I'll tell you.
I am entranced by Milarepa right now, so let's start with him. I love that.
So the character in my show, Intentional, if you notice, his name is Milarepa.
Wow! Oh my gosh!
In the sizzle, his name is Milarepa, and I'd never heard of him before, but there's a very famous Thangka painter from Nepal. His name is Romeo Shrestha. He actually lives in Ireland. He has 4 daughters. He married an Irish woman, and he
Amazing.
lives in a part of
And now
Ireland
he's
that has.
Catholic. No.
Oh, yeah. And he's an amazing guy, and he is the foremost Thangka painter, which, if you know, if in Tibetan art, has the four, the 4 elements, and they spend their whole lives building these paintings. And at the end, you should like finish the painting to actualize your life. And he, according to the philosophy, he's chosen, like the Dalai Lama, he's the 17th reincarnation of the painter. And so every lifetime he comes back. And this lifetime, interestingly enough, and it's maybe someone you should have on your podcast one day, but he came back in this lifetime, and he has this series of paintings called the Enlightenment series. And imagine like a 70-foot tapestry with all gold, absolutely vast, intricate work. And it takes 400 years to do it. And then
I was gonna say he's been painting this for multiple incarnations.
Yeah, exactly. No, literally, and he's never finished it. He finished it this time. He managed to get a school of artists, 100 students in Nepal, 10 years it took them, and he finished it. And it's now, he built a house in the west of Ireland to literally show it. And his whole vision has been to have this giant tree in like the Guggenheim where you sit and meditate and look at it. And that's like, that's his vision for it. But I bring him up because I met with him multiple times. He's kind of a little bit like family. He's Irish, he's in Ireland, so he's Nepalese in Ireland. And when he met me, he's read my poetry books, and he's like, "You are Milarepa, Dylan. You are Milarepa." And I'm like, okay, I don't know who that is. So I started looking and finding and searching, and I'm like, okay, well, to me, he's like the hidden deity that the world really hasn't seen. So I love that you're reading it. That's such a cool name.
That's beautiful. Wow. That's amazing that a Nepalese mystic told you that. That's not just like some, no disrespect, but some crazy guy on the street out here, talking about past lives. That's somebody who's really connected to the process.
Yeah, he's such a champion of my poetry too. I gave him my 2 poetry books, and he's such a, these characters, he'll just call me from Ireland and he'll just read me sections of his diary, or he'll like ask me about this poem that I wrote and what it means. And he's like he's like a guy who's just on the deep realms of questioning and query. And you need them in your life, to keep
and that's beautiful. What I've found is there's a Jung quote that I keep bringing up that's been a mantra recently, where he says, "No matter how lonely you feel, if you do your work consciously and sincerely, unknown friends will seek out and find you." And it's like, that is like the truest thing I've ever heard. Like, the more that you step into your work, what he's calling kind of the work of individuation, right? Then you're gonna find people on that level, and people are also going to leave your life as well. That's part of the sadness of it in some ways, if it doesn't resonate. But it's comings and goings out here, baby.
It really is, because honestly, like, if you letting go is a very important part of life, and if you start frequenting at a certain frequency, a resonation, then other people are going to fall away. And I think that's super astute, because if you go on the path, which is lonely at times, breaking out of where you've been, and you get to where you want to get to, and you start meeting the people that resonate with you, it's honestly so fulfilling and satisfying, because you're like, oh my God, these people I've been waiting for. But then as part of that, gift, there's the severing of ties, like, I mean, you've probably done it multiple times.
But I can't go to Buffalo Wild Wings anymore and drink some beer with the guys.
I mean, you can go back there for a second.
Well, my joke has been that like there is actually like an enlightened master at Buffalo Wild Wings. Like, that's also the beauty of Maya, is that there are these very advanced humans that are just like completely under the radar, that are not on Instagram, that are not, they're just like, you just bump into this little old lady, and like that she's actually the oracle. She baked the cookies for Neo. You know what I'm saying?
Being here in Bali, you want it, the amount of oracles you meet. I mean, these people are so humble every day. Like, some people beam you with a smile here, and you're like, wow, like they have gone places. The light in them, and like, and they make like $2,000-3,000 a year here. A lot of people. So, but their light, it's It's fascinating to be here. And I have to say, like, I've been in the Americas the last 10 years, and now I'm back in Asia after, I've been here since 2010. I was in Bali 3 months back in 2010. And coming back to here, they've figured something out in Bali. Like, I haven't seen one moment of aggression in 4 months. I haven't seen anyone in the chaotic traffic. I haven't seen one person shout at another in 4 months. And everyone is in each other's face on a bike in the heat. Like, their level of
That's amazing.
it's amazing. Their sense of like balance is so strong. And I really do believe it's all to do with their daily prayers. They get up every single morning and they pray and they offer. And so it works. I feel like
It's also nice environment.
well, it's fucking chaotic.
It's hot. It is hot. And it's packed.
It's hot. And it's fumes and like
good looking beaches, but
so much colonialization. Like the Balinese are dealing with a lot of colonialization. Like there's a massive disparity of wealth. Like the land is so sweet, but like there's a lot of issues going on.
Very good noodles.
Very superb rice. Yeah, absolutely. And great coffee, which honestly keeps everything.
Oh, the pros are way outweighing the cons. When you said I haven't seen anything in 4 months, I was going to say I haven't seen anybody act out in 4 hours in Texas.
Texas is actually pretty good. I mean, the Texans are pretty sweet, I have to say.
You're right.
I'll
take that.
January, February, I think for how America goes, like there's lots of really kind people in that part of America. And look, America in general has lots of kind people. Really does, like people who are welcoming and open-hearted and willing to meet you in that place. So
thank you. We do our best. That means a lot from my dear Irish brother. We talked about how we both don't like the Brits.
Well,
sorry. Look, any British people are listening, we actually do love you, but our countries don't like your country. That's all we're talking about. Well, we're also getting to a place of consciousness where there's no countries. That's all just imaginary lines. We're all just one global family. However, we did throw the tea in the harbor. You know what I'm
saying? You did. Well, that was like Catholic versus Protestant. That was
it's not quite as like mythologized. Like there was a little like more shadier than the Santa Clausification of it.
I mean, tea is very valuable. It was very valuable. Like,
right. I mean, it was like two rich guys out fighting against each other, basically.
Yeah. But I mean, I love how America was built on people who protested, the strict religion of the time. They were Protestants, and then like that's why America has this rebel attitude, and like Britain was always like duty and responsibility. And I have an inner Britain. My dad's British. I'm half British, half Irish. I'm like the colonizer and the colonized. And
that's fascinating.
And like a lot of the people I really look up to, like I don't know if you've ever heard of Roger Casement. He's an amazing guy from the 1880s. He single-handedly saved the indigenous in Peru in the 1880s from the Belgian rubber barons, Irishmen. Irish British. I wrote a whole TV series development pitch based on him. He's kind of like one of the greatest unsung international heroes of Irish history. But he was Northern Irish, British planter, saw the atrocities, was in the Congo, saw the heart of darkness there, did a report, supported the indigenous getting saved from the rubber there, and then got sent to the Amazon. And then finally he was like, I keep saving other people. I need to go back and save the Irish. And went back in 1910 and began to like put all his energy, and he was very friendly with the American president, Woodrow Wilson at the time. He used all his power to basically gain Irish independence. And it's a really interesting piece of history because he managed to get 1 million guns and like 500,000 rounds of ammo from the Germans in the middle of World War I. And he managed to get them on a boat going to the west of Ireland. And if they had have actually landed, they didn't land in the end. If they had landed, Irish independence would have been different. And Britain would have not been able to split Ireland the way they did, 26 counties, 6 counties, because we would have had arms to fight them. Instead, we, did a small rebellion in 1916 and were crushed. And then we had to negotiate from that position. But he died. Basically, he was framed for being gay back in 1916, and he got executed. And then the Irish completely abandoned him, and then he came back 50 years later in a coffin, and we understood what he did for Ireland. But it's like one of these stories like that. I think it's a really interesting journey being Irish and British, because you like I have a very sweet spot for the British too, because I think they're like, there's something about them that's very funny when I meet them anywhere traveling in the world. They're hilarious, they're very intelligent, they're a very proud race. But then my Irish brothers, I feel like clan, and it's, I don't know. Do you have a similar experience? I wonder.
It's very interesting that you say that. Before I share that too, have you seen Embrace of the Serpent?
Embrace the Serpent, yeah, I have. Where he
Yeah,
goes looking for Shakruna, yeah, in black and
yeah,
white. Beautiful
yeah.
film, yeah.
That's like one of my fave movies, and you're such a film, connoisseur. That was me feeling cool by referencing a very obscure
Well, that is a
foreign
pretty
film.
cool. No, that
It's
is
a
a very
really
cool.
good movie, and yeah, and it involves the rubber barons that terrorize. And there's a biologist that stumbles upon the shaman. One of the best lines is early in the film, when it's when the shaman's old and it's the young guy, and he says,
Yeah.
he's like, "What are you doing?" And he says, "I'm studying plants, or I'm trying to learn from plants." And the old shaman goes, "That's the smartest thing I've ever heard a white person say," or something. Like he does, like, it's such a great moment. Yeah,
Listen
great
to the clown.
film. But that, yeah, your hero reminded me of that.
Mm. Yeah, that film is it's subtly powerful, and it's never talking about Aya, but it's talking about, the search for that, which is a powerful, yeah. And is this guy like, what, is he like an Austrian ethnobiologist or something, German or Austrian? He's like,
It's based on, I think, historical figures
yeah, it's a
that
true story.
actually did traverse that area and look for that particular plant, and yeah, it's traumatized a little bit, obviously, but
Right.
yeah, no. Back to your question. My family is from Texas.
OG.
I mean, you know, look, respect to the Comanches, respect to the Tonkawas, because this was their land, over basically over 140 years ago. It was Mexico before that. I mean, it was Comanche and Tonkawa land in Mexico. Stephen F. Austin, I think, founded this settlement in like the 1830s, something like that, 1820s. My family, literally, the Pecks, came
Yeah,
here on a wagon from Tennessee.
you're
And
like
my
93, like
like
1883
I think
stuff.
he was 1890s. I'm the fourth. I'm Bob Peck the fourth. My son is Bobby Cinco, and
God, that's great.
my Bob Peck Senior, his dad was named Osceola Peck, which is a crazy name. It's a Native American name. It's a cool name.
Oh,
But Osceola Peck, they called him Big O. And
nice.
Big O, when he was a little boy, walked next to a wagon, like when he was like 5 years old, the wagon train to Texas. So we've been here for a while, and
Yeah.
I'm proud of Texas, but I'm you mentioned Austin, and like what's so great about Austin, like kind of like podcast bro aside, is like it's this bizarre like nexus of what I consider to be Southern hospitality and like that
Mhm.
warmth of the Southern US, without intolerance. Because it's Austin, it has this creative spiritual openness, and like, I mean, sometimes I call Austinites, or at least Texas Austinites, the refugees of Texas. It's like most of my friends are
Styles
not
like
from, yeah, they're from Houston, they're from San Antonio, my wife's from Laredo. It's like, look,
mm,
if you're in a weirder, or not weirder, but we're actually the weird ones or whatever, but
more complex. Yeah.
intolerant. Yeah, if you're more in a less open vibe, but you like Texas, then Austin's for you,
It
but
must feel so
uh,
free. You must,
yeah,
coming from Laredo or like Houston, it must feel so free coming to Austin.
it's definitely a level up from certain city. I mean, Houston, the big cities are now, pretty
Just their own
pretty
thing.
pretty prog these days.
Yeah.
The middle of nowhere Texas, less so. And I have a Gnostic podcast buddy friend who is in Amarillo, and he's like, I'm literally in a sea of churches out here, and he's like, he's the only person that is reading the Gita in like 100 square miles. So it's different out here.
Yeah, but I mean, the faith, what's interesting what I felt about Texas was the simplicity of it is that it's really focused around family. And like, it was really like the word and language and the tone of Texas is like family, integrity, honesty, tell the truth, take care of your community. That's all that matters. And,
handshake, pick up.
Beauty to it. And then you're like, but what about all the other things that being a human is there? And I think obviously in Austin that's being explored. Like, I have in a way where the world has gone with woke consciousness, and there's so many weird things happening in the world, in my opinion. Like Texas feels safe because it feels like
it's a little
feels
free
like
of it,
old values, and then obviously like that could be stifling. So there's always these like lines, like of stiflement, and then this mix of like, because like Bali is interesting because I see the family model very strong here. People are taking care of each other. Like the community's really strong. They all pray together. Like, so all those things are happening. And then I also simultaneously feel like this little stuckness, like there's a dogma to their religion. And I feel a little bit of that, but then I see a lot of joy. So it's like when you're in a place that's too awakened, there's like an ungroundedness to it. Like I've obviously lived in California a bunch, and I love California because there's just so many people who are trippers, like explorers of consciousness. And I love that. And then also you get in situations where you're like, this is completely ungrounded. Like there's nothing holding this together. There's no family. There's like, people are just like
no values.
There's no instilled values. Their values are just like, and I suppose that's just human journey, is like you take a bit of that and then you take a bit of that and you figure out what's really you. And
well, this is a great segue into your work, because you're a filmmaker, a writer, producer of recently spiritual satire. Obviously you've done a variety of TV and film, but the most recent show, We Woke, I mean, you're calling out exactly what you're talking about in your work in terms of like, really what is a ripe topic for comedic discussion is exactly what you're talking about, that kind of valueless, groundlessness, I think is the way you put it. And you just saw that firsthand in your own life, and then you kind of said, this is like,
the exploration and the hungry ghost, I think like to continue to explore is a really beautiful human desire and need, is to like know that like it's available, that you can keep going and keep exploring, keep finding people to bring you on the journey. And then there's a place where you're just a lost angel in LA, in the land of the lost angels. And I suppose I lived there for on and off like 8 years, and then I moved to Topanga, which I would argue is probably the highest concentration of life coaches, spiritual teachers, and kind of high-end hippies in America. It's kind of like the Toloman Valley of America. And living there, I realized that like it's super liberal, it's a super, super liberal place. And so I was like, how do we get everyone to somehow come together? So I made this show where basically a bunch of millennials, spiritual entrepreneurs all living together, but they need Republican money to actually get the project off the ground. So they have to get on with their neighbor. They have to get on with the other side. Even though they're just want to like do everything on their own, they realize that like, actually, well, half of America is the other side. How do I get on with the other side? And I think it's honestly one of the biggest issues right now. And I feel like woke as a concept is part of the whole separation. It's almost like an energetic of separation and division. And so I've changed the name now. It was originally We Woke in 2020 when I shot it. It's now called Eden 2.0. So it's gone a little more biblical, and really
you really got to read my book, Original Sin is a Lie.
No, I know, because it's like it's gone further that way where, you've got the millennial spiritual characters that still have their own version of spirituality and their own journeys, but you've got at the center of it like a Republican man who's come from Houston, made his money in oil, and he's been brought to this compound, and I've reset it now, so it's in Austin. It was originally in California, and he gets brought into this Austin world, and he has to manage all these new liberal, like explorational ideas around, all the different things that happen. He has basically an awakening, and then he has to deal with the awakening, and his marriage is falling apart, and so he gets put in this whole world in Austin from Houston, and that's kind of where the journey of that project has gone now. But yeah,
it's a really great concept, and I was cracking up at the cuts that you were showing me.
cool.
It's really funny, and I think what my thoughts were initially, as someone with Yogananda on my wall, was that when I see content like that, I get defensive. So I'm like, well, hey, buddy, wait a second. And then, like, for it to be coming from you, who is a, east to west esoteric mystic poet, astrologer, deep spiritual seeker yourself, you're the person that I want to be leading the satirical nature of it. I think when there's other folks that poke fun at spirituality, who I shall not name explicitly in this hypotheses here, but what the reason I don't follow them is because they haven't read Autobiography of a Yogi. You know what I mean? Like, because you have immersed yourself into spirituality, you get to play with it, and it's a lot more real, it's a lot more tangible, and it's also like you get to make that. You've earned the right to me as an audience member to,
Thank you.
Bang the piñata.
Well, the thing is that if you have the wrong forces or people who are ignorant in a way, let's say, like, I'm just gonna, poke fun at and like laugh at, and then that's just the only comedic setup, which a lot of Hollywood has done with spirituality. Like, I've seen a lot of like performative spirituality is what I call it, and comedy,
especially on the gram right now. Like, the gram is, they're just doing like, it's
just
like
poking
they're just
it's not fucking
it's
right.
like,
It's not right.
and I'm
It's
just
actually
like,
it's darkness. It's
it
not
is.
the path. And I'm having quite a few discussions, obviously, here in Bali, because I'm meeting all the creators here who are doing all the different things, and it's honestly, it's without it making sound like it's some big deal, it's a little bit of a burden, because I am aware that, like, as these shows go out in the world, a lot of people are going to have your initial feedback, which is like, oh my God, he's talking about me. He's talking like, so there's going to be people that have their, backup. And I think for me, the main thing is you've got to balance the comedy with teaching and education. Because how do you get the mainstream to look at all the different things that the niche is exploring? And you have to make it funny. You've got to make it entertaining. And you can't be like, the problem is like, we've got all these documentaries. We've got great documentaries about how to like evolve and be enlightened, or, go on the path. But that's great. But there's a large swath of humanity that is not going to watch the documentary because it's just not entertaining enough. We need to get, we have multiple people who need to like somehow assimilate spirituality into a narrative structure that can teach and educate and like make people laugh at the same time. And so hopefully that is the line that I am bridging. I mean, I had a screening of We Woke in 2020, and I'll never forget this because I was, I've written this thing in Topanga. And the guy he supported me during it. This guy, he's a super, anchor in the community in Topanga. And he's like, I'm going to invite all the locals. And I'm like, are you sure you want to do that? Like, wait. And he's like, yeah, no, it's going to be fine. It's going to be fine. He'd seen the cut. And I was like, okay.
I'm riffing on this crowd for
Yeah,
90 minutes.
I'm freaked out. So I pull up, I watch it, and like halfway into it, I'm like, okay, they're laughing, but I'm still not sure. Like, and I get to the end of it, and like a bunch of the OG locals are like, this is amazing. I'm like, thank God I'm doing something right, because My worry is like I just become another one of those guys who's just like poking fun at a community that I know so well.
Well,
And
you
I don't want
have to, it's a challenging feat that, I mean, it's a tightrope that you're walking, right? Because what you have to do, in my view, is you actually have to place the wisdom in the narrative as well. Like it has to have the substance of the teaching alongside of the entertainment and the humanness of the whole thing. Like you're wrapping all of that up in there, and like, oh yeah, the dialogue has to be realistic too. Like good luck, brother. I mean, you know, send me some early cuts, I'll give you my thoughts, but like fiction
a
is
morality
very,
checkpoint.
very challenging. Nonfiction is my jam. Maybe I'll mess with something someday, but yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
Tolstoy, I like Tolstoy talked about how the novel is like it's the peak of art, because what you're doing is you're showing the absolute humanity, and you're showing like the fullness of the character. Like famously, in Anna Karenina, for example, the villain who you despise the entire novel, when he sees the baby, when he sees Anna's baby, he has this moment of like regret and remorse, and you empathize with him. You know, like
Make
what
it
Tolstoy's trying to do. Yeah, he's trying to like humanize every person. Like that's an incredible tool, you know, to your
even the
point of
most
like awakening.
darkest people still have humanity deep inside them. And actually, I think we as humans crave to be seen in that way. We're in our lowest moment. We still want to feel seen in it, even if we're in our lowest moment. And I think when we watch that on a screen or in a book, we get that moment where we're like, fuck, I wish someone could accept that really ugly part of me. And that's that, right? That's that other side. And in a way, and this is something that doesn't get talked about, in my highest moment, in my highest actualization, in my like lightest moment, my fucking transcendence, you know, I also want to be seen in that. And there's a lot of people that don't get seen in that. You know, oh yeah, you went and did Vipassana for 10 days and you got in, you know, you came back super calm and enlightened. Like, I don't want to know about that. And that also is not the way. We have to acknowledge each other in our super high points and our darkest low points. Yeah.
I hear you on that. I'm in this interesting period right now, in this kind of non-dual contemplative Milarepa world, to come back to our Tibetan yogi saint brotherhood of the word that comes up with him is futility, Dylan.
The futility.
Futile. It's futile. He said, listen to this. He says, and one of his songs, which by the way, we should talk about. I mean, that's as a poet, you know, that in Tibet, apparently Tibetan language, it's easy to improvise, or easier to improvise song, more so than in other languages. So he's, as you know, but just for anyone listening here, he's known for, he would like sing these songs to people, like when they would challenge him or ask him, why are you meditating here, or who are you, or you know, oh, you think you're this high and mighty thing. He would like sing a song, and that's how he's been captured. This is a quote from him. Yeah, he says, all worldly pursuits have but one unavoidable and inevitable end, which is sorrow. Acquisitions end in dispersion, buildings in destruction, meetings in separation, births in death. Knowing this, one should, from the very first, renounce acquisitions and storing up, and building, and meeting, and faithful to the commands of an eminent guru, set about realizing the truth. You know, I mean, he's the kind of king of renunciance.
So he's saying, because there's going to be decay inevitably with any initiation, not focusing on the end goal and the destination, but rather the immutable truths within what? The process, or just the initiation of it? That's why.
I'm pretty new to him, but you know, what he's doing is he's doing that classic non-dual stuff, which is evident in the yogis. It's evident in, you know, A Course in Miracles is one of my Bibles. It's a non-dual text. You know, futility of form, and like at the same time, like I don't personally think that these kinds of ideas, particularly non-duality, I think it's a misinterpretation actually of non-duality, that it means don't give a shit. Like, I don't think that that's the case. I don't think this stuff condones apathy or indifference. In fact, what a lot of Milarepa, for example, does talk about is for the benefit of all beings. He's constantly talking about may all sentient beings be free and happy. He's motivated by this. His discipline on himself and his meditations is like for the awakening of everyone. He says, I've meditated so long, the difference between myself and others has disappeared. You know, like it's actually connective. It's not detached. Yeah, it's kind of back to your Lao Tzu thing of like the fluidity, you know. It doesn't
Well,
mean
really,
go off.
it is.
Yeah.
Lao Tzu speaks nonstop. I mean, so I've had Lao Tzu beside my bed for 22 years now. Same
Yeah.
book.
Nice.
It's
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. It's the David Hinton version, which for me is the greatest translation. And it's really like Goenka, who Vipassana, like it really does come to the same source, which is like, because Lao Tzu talks so much about the problem with initiating anything, which does sound like apathy. Is like
Yeah.
if you strive, or if you like look to profit, or if you look to lead, then you're like inevitably not in the way. And I love this wisdom because it's so the opposite of how our society runs now. And
Yeah.
sometimes I actually think about the true nuts and bolts reality of that. Like, is that really feasible in our day-to-day time? The bottom line is reading it doesn't matter. It wires the brain to get to the middle place, which is like hopefully a calm middle space. So it's so beautiful to read it before bed. But sometimes I question, like, was there a time in the world, was in 5000 BC in China, like, was that a time when you could be so in the way, like a river, that and life would move that way? And it's a really interesting thing to go back to futility in this regard. I love the idea of futility not being apathy is a giant question.
It really is, and well put. I mean, I think things were a little slower, you know, during the writing of Tao Te Ching, but you know, that's also a trap, right? Is like to say like, oh, if only, then you know,
Then I
and
would be in, yeah, exactly. Then
yeah,
I'd be
it's like no, you're here, you know, we're nowhere else, and it's only going to speed up also, you know, and so like there's even more need of grounded presence to help our fellow brothers and sisters in this, like, you know, insane. I referenced this the other night with some friends, the Terrence McKenna quote where he says, I'm paraphrasing, but he says, it's a very small amount of time from holding a spear on the savannah overlooking the grasslands to the entire species on a ship speeding through the galaxy at the speed of light.
That's so, it's like it's
Yeah,
like
it's
literally.
very, very quick, actually. It's not as far away as you think. It's like, you know, that's a great image. And also, that man did a lot of psychedelics still.
Well, he probably sees that, like, actually, like, this is everything there is. I met a guy once. This is a place in Ireland called Victor's Way, and it's this amazing German guy who like found Wicklow, which is the Garden of Ireland, and he bought this piece of land and he started bringing giant Hindu statues from India and Sri
Oh,
Lanka. And there's like,
that's sick.
imagine it's what he calls a spiritual theme park, and you walk around it, and there's like giant Hindu temples, and it's this whole mystical journey. I'll never forget. I
Yeah.
first went when I was like 19, 20, and it's still there. It's been there like it's 20 years. It's gotten bigger. He just keeps bringing in more money. It's such a beautiful place.
In
And I
Dublin?
in outside Dublin, like an hour from Dublin. It's in Wicklow. I totally recommend your viewers seeing that. It's one of the
Oh my
coolest things
gosh,
in Ireland.
it's amazing.
Victor's Well. Yeah. And I never forget meeting him the first time. I was a young lad, like 19, 20. He said, "Do you want to know the meaning of life?" And he looked at me and I was like, "Of course I do." He's like, "Everything in life is this." And he pulled up my hand and I was like, "Okay, yeah, he's gonna show me something." And he just went, "That's it." And when I think of your quote saying that like the difference between Lao Tzu on a cart in ancient China and us on a spaceship, it is just that. It's like it's really like the consciousness is so available for such, like now we're like talking about Starlink, and we're talking about like we're literally moving into science fiction as we speak. And so like it really is like that, because time is absolutely, it's a memorial. It's not even a thing. So I love that idea.
Yeah, that's
And I do,
beautiful.
yeah, I agree with you that like Lao Tzu's wisdom is more important now than ever, because how do you walk the way, and how do you not strive for material gain, in a society that's always pushing you towards that? Like the one thing for me is so interesting about social media, for instance, social media as a construct is completely against the Buddhist way. The Buddhist way is to never self-define, is to never self-promote. Self-promotion is very low energy according to the Buddhists. And I remember learning this at the beginning of social media. I was like 20 years old, and like, the beginning of MySpace and Bebo and all that stuff. I remember going like, this is kind of like off. Like, why are we doing this? This is just a giant self-promotion vehicle. Like we're doing it right now. We're discussing and actually using technology in a beautiful way. But like when we post it on Instagram, then we're part of this whole self-promotion vehicle, which according to the Buddhists is a low aspect. And how do we come to terms with that? Our whole society is being funneled towards that. I deal with it all the time. It's
Well,
such an
so
fun.
the slogan, one of the slogans for this show is stolen from Ram Dass, quoting Lao Tzu, because he says that he used to say this before lectures. He who knows does not speak. He who speaks does not know. He says, I think about that every time I go give a lecture.
So
And it's
deep.
like a really great reminder right
You're
before
gonna
you're about to
speak.
talk. That the
Who's
fact that
walking the
I'm
room
doing this is
silent,
inherent.
meditating, and like just transmit your meditation to them.
Yeah, it can't
Wow.
be spoken. So here we are, we're going to do our best. I think, for me, it's a great point about social, and, a lot of the conversations around like creativity and like kind of curation versus consumption is something
Mhm.
that my friend James talks a lot about. Like, I think most people are stuck in the consuming world, which can be negative. Whereas, like, if you're using it to curate your own, kind of excitement and like inspiration and spiritual learning and so on, like, there's definitely value to, I think
Creativity.
having some intention, I think, is
Yeah,
part of it too, right?
really is. I think like when you go out there on this giant web, what is your intention? And I've been talking a lot about this recently, because there's a lot of people, talking to camera and offering their wisdom, and there's lots of coaches, and that's kind of my world because I'm writing about that. And I had a big discussion with a friend of mine. I said, as long as your intention is positive, like to serve
Yeah,
others,
yeah,
like, hey, I have embodied this piece of wisdom, and I feel like it's to serve. If it is anything but that, if it is to gain, if it is to like attain wealth, if it is only to like manipulate others, if it comes from that intention, it is not right. And I think we are dealing with the giant tug of war between that, where people are embodied and they're sharing the wisdom, and then we have this whole plethora of people who are using corporate NLP tactics to, use spirituality to gain a lifestyle and to make money. And I think that's part of why the two shows I'm working on are kind of important, because that charlatanism within spirituality is very dangerous, because it's not it's in turn, instead of turning people towards a more giving, like, let's say, egoless reality, it's the world turning into using spirituality for manipulation, which is really detrimental.
completely agree. And it's not new.
No,
It's
it's not.
not new at all. It's
It's
just, this is just the form that it's in right now.
so true.
But
Mhm.
a very wise man from Nazareth, you know, made some pretty great comments about the Pharisees, right? Which were the way I described the Pharisees is like they were the teachers that were like running for mayor. They
Mm.
were like kind of like the
Politics.
local, they were politic guys essentially of religion. They were saying, look how holy I am. look how much I know. I mean, I'm generalizing an entire group of people, obviously.
I've read the scriptures, and like I have the Brahmic knowledge, or not the Brahmic
Yeah,
knowledge, but Vedic knowledge.
exactly. And he called them out in a way that was useful, not in an egoic way of like condemnation. And I think he did a pretty damn good job. And actually, kind of back to your earlier question around my work with the book, I'm not sure if that'll be in the episode. Maybe it'll be in the bonus episode. No, I don't know. We were talking about before the show started about my obsession with New Testament scholarship, and how, for example, if there's a story, sometimes there's a story in Mark, the earliest gospel, that then there's a story in Matthew, a later gospel, and Luke, and so there, actually, this is it.
Nice.
Gospel parallels.
Cool.
And so what it is it'll have the same story, and then it'll just divide on divorce, accusations against Jesus. So it'll take the same event, which is usually not in 3. It's rare. I don't think there's any that are in 4. There's only a handful that are in 4, if any at all.
Oh, wow.
Only a few in 3. A lot of stories are in 2, of course. 2
Shows you how much interpretation is.
But right, exactly. So you look at that same story, and like, so for example, Jesus' condemnation of the Pharisees. I do write about this in the book. In Mark, the first gospel, it's very brief. And it's very just kind of matter of fact, like they're being hypocritical. Like, when you pray, you don't have to make a big show of it. Like, he's literally calling out performative spirituality, right? When you pray, go into your closet because it's between you and Creator. It's don't be ensnared by the outward adoration, reputation.
Performance is literally higher performance as a piece of lexicon is like a whole thing right now. I've seen lots of people on Instagram doing performance, and I always go back to this
performance. That's funny. Hashtag performance.
No, but not even like for real. Like, I follow multiple people that are using that exact term, and it's like, wow. A ritual around prayer, and sometimes, like, I went to this event in Topanga back in December, and like, it's called Holy Drip, and it was fucking amazing. It's like 5 or 6 women all did their little like holy prayer around like ritual and ceremony, and it was like 100 people, a curated event, really beautifully done. But then I see a lot of stuff online which is like performative spirituality again, as I talk about. And for me, like, it all goes back to this beautiful proverb. There's a great story about, imagine this monk, he's back in Lao Tzu's time, and he's been meditating, and he's attained the wisdom, and he's coming down from the hill after 20 years, and he comes back down the hill, sits in a cafe, and he sits there, and he arrives there, and he's like, oh my God, I've attained all this, and everyone in the cafe is like, oh, okay, dude, that guy's crazy, like, don't take any notice. So everyone goes away, and he's like, oh. The same monk comes down from the hill after 20 years, he sits down in the cafe, quietly sits in the corner, and after like 10 minutes, people are like, whoa, what's that over there? Like, what is that energy? What is that essence? And then they slowly come over, and then after like 20 minutes, people are like, hey, who are you? And slowly but surely, the whole cafe is just surrounded by the wisdom that's embodied in this man. And then they ask him questions, and he teaches from that place. And I think it's a beautiful parable to show that, like, when you really embody wisdom and you prayer in the closet, like you say, people feel it. And what we're doing with a lot of our social media is like, here I am, I can do this. And it's sometimes just not as embodied. And I don't know if it's having the impact that we could be having,
No, you got to get those hooks better. You got to make those stronger hooks, brother. What's trending right now?
You're so right.
No, I was talking about that recently with some friends too, around like the spectrum of content strategy to Dear Diary. That really is what it seems like to me. Like, I've been posting now related to the book for about 2 years, and I'm about 85% Dear Diary, where it's just like, this is what's hitting me right now. I'm finishing Milarepa. This shit's crazy, you guys. And part of me is like, should I be doing more of the content strategy? Or it's like, I mean, that's like a loaded concept or whatever that has like this marketing cold machine like thing, but maybe that's like efficiency and productivity in a new way. Yeah, like it doesn't have to be pejorative. Like there's people that are like content strategists for a living, and that's dope. And they're thinking about the psychology of all of it. So, it's interesting. But I think beyond that, it's like, to your point of like sincere service and sincere
intention.
embodiment and intention, right? It's like whatever the spectrum of that is less important than like what you're actually
Well,
trying to do.
and also just to be like, because I'm a bit like strong sometimes with this, is that like everyone who's teaching from where they are is teaching someone at some level. So
Yeah.
for me to be like, oh my God, like you're not fully embodied and you shouldn't be teaching, that's not the way either, because there's always someone, a disciple under Jesus. There's always someone that's going to receive your wisdom. And so there's that too. Like just because you haven't spent the 20, 30 years and become an authority on something, should you not share it? I struggle personally with people. I feel it. Like if I don't feel embodiment, I don't listen. Like there's not many, for instance, there's not that many men I'm following on Instagram that I'm like feeling so inspired by and like super like inspired by. There's a couple, and maybe that's up to me to find more. There's also got to be a piece of compassion and empathy within that, because there is someone learning from that share. I just know if we're going to pull each other forward into the next iteration of humanity where we get to more peace and more love and more understanding, we're going to have leaders that are embodied and have built the authority. And I think that's really important, because in our society with TikTok and short memory span and this kind of like content that's like just created, it's a journey for us all. Like when are you fully embodied? Who gives you the tick?
Yeah, right. That's funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm hearing, I mean, I definitely resonate clearly with a lot of what you're saying. I do hear some of your like almost in a little bit of like despair about the state of it. And maybe that's because you're kind of a scientist of the cultural context of this world right now, more so than me. Even like I'm a spiritual commentator, in some way. But I think the fact that you're in the lab, like you're really like studying the life coaches, like up close and personal. You're talking to these people. So I get that, like, in some way it must be draining a little bit for you to like just be constantly like
Absorbing.
examining kind of, yeah, like authenticity or inauthenticity. Like you're kind of constant, you're like a field researcher of like Pharisees and Jesus. It's a fascinating like environment to be in, because I mean, I think what's coming up for me is just, again, like just zooming out, like, yeah. And your comment about like everyone's learning from someone, like that's a beautiful image. Like, the zoom out to me is like the Maharaji, like Neem Karoli Baba, don't you see it's all perfect, which is like, that line isn't for everyone, and it's not for every situation and environment and so on. But like when you're in a space of deep presence, when you're in a space of like real true connectivity, like that's what the non-dual consciousness is. It's like this beautiful unfolding. Lao Tzu talks about unfolding. Like it's constantly, it's gonna be okay. Like there's just it's what's the Lao Tzu, nature doesn't hurry and yet everything is accomplished. Like there's just this unfolding of it all. And I'm motivated by you to call out injustice and to call out inauthenticity and so on from a place of service. And at the same time, like we can't drown either.
Yeah, well, and we have to focus on some of the green shoots and some of the more positive aspects that coming from it. Like, if someone's in deep despair and cynicism around where the world is, I actually go back to like when I was 15, so 25 years ago. Years ago, when I started doing yoga and like wanting to, be vegan and drink oat milk, no one did
You're
yoga.
15? Yeah, you were ahead of the curve, brother.
Yeah, like no one wanted to do yoga. No one talked about meditation. I felt like I was just on my own the whole time. There was no yoga studio in Dublin. There was by the time I was 20, but at 15 there wasn't.
Yeah.
I had to travel to India at 19, and like I literally had to go in search of psychedelics. Like I literally traveled to Venezuela at 20 years old, and like I went searching in Nepal for
You're the
Vipassana
last gen of doing that
with no phone,
with
and
no
19.
phone. You
Yeah, I
went to
had
the
no phone.
freaking library.
Yeah, and if you were lucky, you could get a guidebook. Like I went to India, like Delhi at 19 on my own and traveled in India and Nepal for months. And I had no guidebook and I had no plan. I got there 2 in the morning, I had no hotel, nothing. Like, and the universe or however you want to call it, like just took care of me. And I just, yeah, what was my point of this? My point is that the world is getting better in that
Mm,
like yoga is everywhere,
right.
meditation is everywhere, breath work is everywhere. There is healthy food in most major cities, even on airplanes, even now beginning in garage stops. Like
Yeah.
when I look at that as a piece of consciousness, as a broad spectrum consciousness, I see the world getting better. And I know it's had to change a lot. Like even in my own culture, like when I go back to Ireland now, I don't see as much alcoholism. I see a lot of people going to the gym. I see a whole new
Mm,
generation of people like taking care of themselves and not just sitting in the pub all day. That's the older generation. And so there's a lot of really positive stuff to go
yeah.
through. And I do think the spirituality life coach, guide thing is part of us evolving. And so I want to cap that off by saying it is part of a larger expansion in consciousness. And I think a lot of it's positive.
Yeah, I agree, and I appreciate that. I, you know, I'm some of the conversation I've been having are about the term New Age,
Oh yeah.
which is a such a complex term, and it's usually pejorative. In fact,
Yeah.
it seems like I have to give up on this term because
Well, and spirituality, the word. Because what is spirituality? It's the study of the spirit. But it's so greenwashed.
spirituality isn't as negative as new. When
Right.
people say
As
New
the
Age, they mean
You're right.
wacko idiots usually. And it's like I also have been I didn't go to Venezuela, but I did read Living Buddha, Living Christ in like
Mm.
seventh grade. That I've been reading this stuff for a long time, and um, there was a bookstore called New Age Bookstore. Like if
Right.
you go into half price books, like New Age New Thought is a category. Like it's just it's a classifiable corner
Yeah.
of knowledge of like interfaith appreciation, mystical,
Interfaith. Yeah.
esoteric, perennial flaw. It's like all my shit. It's like all the stuff I'm into. And so I've been kind of like playfully talking about New Age a lot with people, like that term. And it
So
seems like the
what's an upgraded term of it then? Have you come to it?
well, yeah, spirituality, mystic philosophy is something that
I mean,
talk.
mystic philosophy, like I like that,
I think it's
I
mystic philosophy because even mysticism, people are a little like freaked out by it. It's almost like magical or something, or mystical,
yeah,
magical. It's like, no, no, no. Mystic philosophy has a little more of like it's just
but
inner
then
work.
philosophy has its own connotations, right? So people are like,
Right.
oh, philosophy is so fucking Greek and
It's
boring
so
and easy.
heady. I know.
Yeah,
Look,
exactly.
it's
So,
impossible to brand anything correctly in this world. But
well, it's like people talk about the 5D now, and I think this is absolutely theirs. Everyone's just like, oh no, it's the 5D. So they have the 5D section. But then, like, what
yeah.
are the rest of humanity just in the 3D over here in the other part of the bookshop? Like, I don't think that's the answer either.
Well, yeah, but to your point about like civilization advancing, like New Age, like or people say like, oh, all religions are like mostly the same. Like that is amazing. The global civilization has never it's never become a cliche before that all
Mm,
religions are pretty similar. Like that's a
you're right.
new level of consciousness that we've hit on to be like, yeah, they're mostly the angry people or the extremists that fight. They are all, everybody just wants to worship their own God and buy a sandwich. It's like, okay.
So right though, like we're in a time now where actually the barriers between the religions is falling away. That's so
It
beautiful.
seems like it. It seems like it. At
I mean,
least
it's just
from
a
inside of my echo chamber.
Well, because back in the day, you didn't know. Like, so let's
Yeah,
say you're in the Middle East, you don't know what's happening in Mongolia. You don't know what's happening with the
right.
Hopi in America. Like,
Yeah,
you can't,
information.
you maybe you just meet this tribe and they want to kill you because you don't wear the same color. So it's very like this instant division because there's no knowledge that's like, in the newsphere or the whole way around the world. And the internet has just broken that down. That's a really beautiful way of looking at it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the internet and it's airplanes, you know, which are your
Airplanes. Yeah.
friends.
Yeah,
And,
they are.
so those things are helping. And, for me, I mean, really my life study is the world mystics. And when you read them, as you have, and if you're listening to this, you probably have, um, it's apparent. It's almost annoying to me, Dylan, how similar the masters sound. When you put them up next to each other. I mean, it's like, oh, when you break the veil, you talk like this. Like you'd have this level of like unconditional love,
Mm.
complete radical acceptance and presence. You're just this generator energy
Of service.
and of service and like peace and inner peace and outer peace. And like it's like is anybody else seeing it? And I think to our point earlier, like people are getting it now,
Oh yeah.
it's just yeah.
Like between the Kabbalah and the Torah and the Bible and Lao Tzu and like it's like the
There are
basically
differences, but
the
the
eternal truth.
core, yeah,
Yeah, the
the kernel,
eternal truth
baby.
are like 10, like and obviously like there's really like 10 immutable truths. Like maybe you could put down 10 that run across all religions. And I wonder if that is its own religion, which is like the unified religion or whatever that is.
Let's make a new one.
Yeah. These are like
I got two
the
guys
Burning
that
Man.
could run it. Irishman
Burning Man has its
and a
10,
Texas man.
yeah, no, I mean
Um,
Texas is a good breeding ground for it. It's the 2.0 of Christianity. It's like the Vatican City 2.0, right?
it's a strange place. What are you working on? You're working on it looks like intention. Sorry, I just lost my
Intentional.
bio.
Yeah,
Intentional.
intentional. So like how it's working now is I'm here in Bali and intentional was a Californian concept, like a 2.0 from WeWoke,
Yes.
basically, but more of a family-run ranch that inherited a ranch and they're all living together in a commune. And what I'm doing is Bali for me is the new world, whatever that is, new age. Like this place is designed, the locations, kind of like it's the melting pot. It's one of the new melting pots of the earth. Being here is fascinating. Like everyone's here and everyone's getting on. And it's
Hmm.
a wild
It's like
place
it's
to be.
possible.
Yeah, it's really interglobalized, small little island that's highly functioning. And I feel like, well, we feel like, well, it's also financial as well, like our investors from here and then obviously locational. I think like a TV show set in Bali would be phenomenal. No one's done it. White Lotus has now done Sicily and they're now doing Thailand. I think someone eventually is going to make a Balinese show. And I have my other Californian projects. So the vision is why I'm here is to shoot intentional during the fall here. And
Amazing.
they're my two projects. I have an older project that's now going, but it's not so much around spirituality, so I won't talk about it so much. But they're my two main focuses right now and they're versions of the original WeWoke. Like WeWoke has become Eden 2.0, and then intentional is its own segue from the two of them, but talking about different themes.
And it's because
Intention,
it's such a rich subject matter that it just
yeah.
creates
Well,
children.
it's
It's
like,
interesting.
yeah, that's a beautiful way of looking at it. But yeah, like, Eden 2.0 is more like a spiritual incubator. Like people have to live together and get on in an incubator. And intentional is like a commune. Is it a cult? Bit
Hmm.
more sexualized, bit more like bit more Burning Man. That's a little bit more over the top. And Eden's a bit more like, how do the right and left get on? It's a little more political. That's
I
why
like it. Oh, they're both
yeah.
very, very big potential for both, for sure. It's exciting.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, well, we'll see. Look forward to telling your listeners one day about or where they're
You'll have to come back. You'll have to come back and talk more.
we're gonna
How do you,
shoot in Texas. So like Eden will be in Texas. So my intention
oh,
is
cool.
to
So you'll be back in town. You are coming back to
2025.
Austin.
Yeah, I'll be
Okay.
back at some point, but it could be, it could be another 6 months or so.
Yeah,
So
you missed the eclipse, man.
I mean,
I know you're sad.
it was wild. Did you actually look at it?
We did. It was a pretty cloudy day in East Austin, unfortunately. We did see, I saw a black ball.
Well,
It
I
was
hear
pretty
I
rad.
whole mixed things. If I mean, a lot of my research with the indigenous is that they hide.
You're supposed to not be out under
Not
it,
just
according
look
to
at it.
the Native Americans. Yeah.
A lot of, and not just the natives, like a
Oh,
lot,
indigenous everywhere. Yeah. I
yeah,
saw
like
like a viral TikTok and it was a guy being like, you're supposed to go inside the Pueblo.
and
And
meditate.
literally everybody else was like, all the whites were out here
Well,
with
I
the
wasn't.
glasses.
I wasn't. I was like, and people invite me to events and stuff, and like all over the place. I was like, no, this is not something you go and look at. Like this is,
Well, you're the one who told me about the Eclipse Music Fest.
well, yeah. I mean,
That's
that
what we
was
were
to
talking
me
about.
because it was so cool. Like they did a massive one in Oregon years ago, and like it's like
Yeah.
8 or 10 of the best
All the
festival
biggest DJ
creators in
people.
the world coming together, and so it's massive
Yeah.
like community. How was it? Like, what was the feedback in Texas on that? Like, do people like it?
I think it even got canceled like the day of or day before because I saw people at a brewery that were super sad.
Mm.
But what this is the craziest thing about the eclipse, like you're an astrologer, so you have to come back and we'll have to do a
Well,
like long
it
form
was the
astrology
beginning,
piece.
it was the beginning of the Mercury retrograde. So it's like
Right.
it's almost all ground to a halt in Texas as it happened, which was really interesting because
Yeah.
also Mercury goes and stops
There was a
commerce.
lot of slowing
It was
down in April, March and
yeah.
April.
Did you feel
Uh,
that? Jeez, I did too. It was a
oh,
very deep,
absolutely.
it was so
Just
slow.
just it was nighttime, Dylan. It
It
was
was the winter.
nighttime for like 4 minutes. I mean, it was psycho emotionally for a month, but yeah, in that moment, it was
Yeah.
bizarre. And then we heard a siren come by. Like my kind of like diary about the eclipse was we were out in the backyard, my wife and child, and it got dark, it got quiet, it got like mystical, and then like I'm pretty sure I heard a gun. Like we hear guns every once in a while. We're in Texas. What's up? Like I heard a rifle and then a
Wow.
siren like right
Wow.
after the eclipse is passing and it was like, oh, it's still the old world. It's
Uh,
like like all this build up, all this apocalypse or new age or new era or whatever it is. Like, no, it's still the same thing.
well,
Milarepa's
I
right.
also,
It's all
well,
just
here's another thing, and this is why I try to not look at any images. There was so many images placed all over social media. I couldn't not look at it,
mm,
but I didn't want to look at it. Some people argue, and I'm not going to say I agree with this, but there's a geomancy, and there's a very high potential to harness the energy of an eclipse, and you don't know what forces are at play. Like there are
mm,
lot of people in the world using magic all the time.
yeah,
And I know it's not talked about, but it's happening. Like, there are large dark forces and large dark forces. And a date like that and that image of the moon curved and stuff, to me, it was fucking weird. Like,
mm,
whenever I saw it the next couple of days after, I was like, oh, I don't want to see that. And
mm,
that could be me getting in my head, but I also instinctually was like, it didn't feel clean to me. And I'm glad I didn't
mm,
look. And that is a psycho-spiritual discussion. I think like eclipses are really interesting moments. Astrologically, what they are basically like steroid souped up new and full moons. They're like a
right.
full moon has massive, long-reaching potential. What you do in that moment matters. And so I do think it's a very powerful moment to like sit inside and meditate. I think it's a powerful moment to tune in to like the inner world and see what comes true from that. I
Yeah.
can't say I was that. I did actually meditate that day, but I didn't meditate the exact time because I was in this side of the world, I think. But yeah, I'd love to know. I would love to know more people's opinions about like that experience for them and like how is their
Yeah.
life going since then, and like you're hearing the gun and the siren. like, yeah, that's not
It was
fucked
a
up.
bizarre, like profound and mundane duality. Like we're just like, oh, like just appreciating the celestial, like, like we're like, we'll be dead. Like the next time it happens in this state, this body, like the heart won't pump probably,
Yeah.
unless Elon installs some new cables,
I
as you mentioned earlier. But probably this
think
body might not make it to the next. So we were, there was some sanctity around that, rarity, and then yeah, to hear like the gun and the sirens was just like, oh no,
well,
same shit, different eon.
here's a piece. So usually eclipses, the culmination on the impact of an eclipse is felt 6 months later. What is 6 months later from, what was it, April 7th?
Yeah, 7th or 8th or something.
It's going to be October 7th when that materializes, which is, I don't know what's going on in Texas, but I think it's going to I think something is going to happen with Texas this year and the election in America. I don't know what's happening.
Secede?
Well, like maybe steps. Like I don't think secede within 6 months, but like what's happening I've seen some very interesting stuff like between Abbott and the government the last few months. Like I'm not watching a lot of Texan politics.
He's been the governor for a long time,
he's
and
doing
his party has been in power. There was a guy that was almost as bad as him before, Rick Perry. So we've had terrible Republican governors, pretty much my entire adult life. I could not disagree with the governor more politically than I do. Yeah,
right now.
pretty much. Yeah, pretty much.
Yes, I don't know if it's going to happen, but it going over Texas is interesting to me. Where the eclipse lands, being election year, what I'm saying is
there's more of a supercharged on a path that it blazed upon.
Come October, November, near the election, what's going on in Texas?
Interesting.
I'll watch it. That's to me the most interesting because it went over Texas. I think something's going to.
And I actually already read it in episode 2, but there's a really great, to my guest, Loren Janelle. I read the chapter in Autobiography of the Yogi. I think it's chapter 16, Outwitting the Stars, which is the great little, it's really the best explanation for astrology I've ever heard. And anytime I share it with anyone, they're like, that really resonates. The story, just in brief, because the listeners would have already heard it if you listen to episode 2, but he says, young Yogananda, his guru, he's at his guru's ashram, and Sri Yukteswar says, go buy a bangle, you need to buy an iron bracelet. And he says, oh, I don't believe in astrology, master, like what are you talking about? And he says, that doesn't matter if you believe it or not. He says, gravity existed long before Newton discovered it. The cosmos would be quite chaotic if it depended on human belief, the laws of physics. And essentially what he explains, this great Yanavatar, Sri Yukteswar explains that these celestial bodies, I'm butchering the paraphrase here because it's such a poetic prose, but he says, these celestial bodies are so large and they're constantly moving, and they're moving immense amounts of energy and frequency. And so they do have an effect, they do have an impact. However, and also it takes a very, very sophisticated understanding to be able to understand it. He says charlatans have ruined the very complex art of it. This is in like 1910 or something, which is hilarious. That he said that then. And he also says, however, if you connect with the divine, that actually, he says, the wise man defeats his planets. Like you're still able to transcend the planetary interactions and so on, but it does impact you, it does affect you, you should be aware of, etc. Which is like,
my partner is constantly like, this Mercury retrograde thing, because I'm a Gemini ruled by Mercury, and the Mercury retrograde happens times a year.
Right. Yeah. It's brutal, to be honest. I'm aware of it.
preparing for it. Like if you're a Virgo or a Gemini, it impacts you. But I love the idea, and this is what my partner keeps saying.
But it's scapegoating.
Yeah, you could exactly. It's like, oh no, everything's slowing down, and like everything's wrong, or like, my phone broke, or my computer's not working. Oh, it's just retrograde. Don't worry about it. It'll be functional after retrograde. You're like, it's a constant scapegoat. And the higher answer of what you said there is so true. Is like, can you transcend that energetic, imprint and transcend it? And I love that.
Yeah,
Go beyond.
It's an important couplet there. Like, it does have impact, and also, because ultimately, I mean, the yoga philosophy is, the yoga philosophy is man is spirit. So the body actually isn't who we truly are, and it's mystic philosophy too, right? But like, it affects the body, it affects matter, but you're not matter ultimately. So you don't get too worried.
About the material plane and like your centeredness in it. The planets are so interesting because I think it's a very masculine way of logically deducting information from above, which is super masculine. And the feminine, she pulls knowledge from the earth, from below. Like, right. I talk, like, any women that I know are really connected. When they connect from below. And I think if you're really going to walk in the world connected, as a man or a woman, you need to know that, like, you can pull knowledge from below and you can pull knowledge from above.
That's really nice.
Sometimes astrology, you're just pulling from the logic and from the mind and from the masculine, from the yang. And are you missing the deeper intuition, the feeling, the emotive knowledge from below?
Beautiful. We're on the earth, after all, and we're products of where the sun is birthing us, and yet our home is the earth for now, or our apartment.
Yeah, exactly.
It's temporary.
We're the seeds from below, but it's the sun that's fettering us,
feeding us.
But it's both that are as important.
That's
and
beautiful.
I do think the world's moving into a more yin world. From my observation, the feminine has a stronger voice. The yin is being taught. We're being taught not to perhaps move everything just with force and with action, which is masculine. We're beginning to being asked, how do you emotionally transfer this? How do you deal with your inner world? How do you, I really do believe at multiple levels in society, we are being asked how to walk in the world in a more feminine way. And I think it's our entire generation. I think this is going to be 40, 50 years. And I think men specifically that don't listen to the inner intuition and walk through the world with a bit more feminine knowledge are going to get left behind in the future economy. Like, I think it's honestly that important. If you be in the old world and be a man in the old way, I think you're going to lose out in the next.
The Don Drapers and. Yeah, I think you're right. I'm, we're all students on the path. We all have work to do. I do think that I'm very acquainted with my sacred feminine. Have a ways to go, but I've hugged some trees. That's all I'm saying. And I
keep holding a few more trees, you'll be on the path.
and I completely agree in terms of even like the economic future. Like, for example, I work at Meta as my day job. Ironically, about the Instagram social world. We'll have to have part 3 on the algo. No, whenever I leave this company, then we'll really have a conversation. The people that I work with are badasses. They're all very, very, very talented. They are extremely hardworking, which is actually why I don't know if you know this, but I do the mindfulness, or we talked about it a little bit. I do meditations there, and amazing. They need that shit, and because we all do. But the women that work there are absolutely. Not only are they as good as all the men, I mean, I really think that the best workers and employees, both leaders and ICs, like team leads and directors and ICs that I've worked with, the women outshine the men, like pretty much across the board. There's badass men managers, there's badass men ICs, what's going on? But I think as a whole, like it is unbelievable how bad A these gals are. And it's like, this is like the fact that even America, like aren't women CEOs, I'm making this up, but it's like, it's less than 10%, which is like, which is way 20th century. Like the next 50 years, 100 years is going to be so many more female leaders, so many more female executives. Like it's going to be a different scene, and it's a long time coming.
I believe that the Me Too movement was like this sword at the beginning of a new juncture. And I think the juncture was like, okay, this energy is coming. How are you going to begin to adjust and receive it and understand it? And I think what you're saying, the same thing, is that like we have to understand that like how the world moves is changing. And I think the Me Too movement was like this fork, you know, for how men are going to react and how they're going to talk to and how they're going to understand and harness, I think in a way, harness, you know, an energy and a voice that actually is just being kind of like shut down for a long time. And there's some people that say, and astrologically, you look at there's long cycles and there's short cycles, but some people say that we needed the masculine energy to build the planet, to build it in ways, to build the ports, to
build it and trash it.
Yeah, well, that's all of us.
I mean, I know you're not making that assumption.
Yeah, and I'm saying that like in the Earth age,
yeah,
which was the last 200 years, we built everything, and now we're in the air age of ideas. And now that things are built, now we need to figure out how to like make things more functional. You know, how to nurture things, because we basically built how the thing functions. Now it's figuring out how to optimize it and make it more efficient. And I think the feminine, by her natural declivity, is, you know, figures out how the home works better, like, you know, efficiency. And I think that runs through all the different gamuts of work, of relationship.
More psycho-emotional sophistication, more empathy and tolerance, more, you know, all those things.
Less building, like
lead on, ladies.
But then within that, we're still going to need strong men. Like listen, let's just to cap that off by saying, you know, we still need high testosterone. We still need, like, because that's another thing I'm seeing a lot of in the health, is that like the testosterone levels are way down. That's super worrying, because we need men to still be in their masculine and to provide and to be fathers. And then we need women to still be, guardians. And so I think that's the juncture we're at. Like, you can't have men becoming women and the testosterone levels are dropping. Like, you can't have that either. And I'm seeing that, and it's a little bit of a worrying thing. You need strong men as well, and it's just how we all interact, which I think is going to change.
And strong men, I think the strongest men appreciate the female offering, right? That's the whole like kind of thesis of the sacred masculine and the sacred feminine, is like the true strong man, not like the stupid competition with the big stone balls or whatever, but like the strong masculine, the sacred masculine, is actually the perfect foil to the sacred feminine. That's the beauty. They revere each other. Actually, it's not. They're not at odds.
Well, and they put each other to the opposite pole. Like, the feminine could be so much more softing and receiving if the masculine is actually in its strength. It's like the middle place that everyone gets lost when men don't know if they're men and have to be more masculine. And then this middle thing is, you need polarity.
Right. That polarity and that neutrality. That water flowing through the stream, baby. Dylan Townsend, you and I could talk for a few days.
We could, we'll do a second round when the show is launching or something like that.
Come back to Austin, Texas. We'll drink a Shiner beer. We should have a Shiner and then a Guinness and then a tea.
That's great. I'm like, what's a Shiner? Just so I'm clear.
Shiner is the oldest brewery in Texas. It's Sputzel Brewery. It's a famous old German brew. It's pretty good. It's not like the best. I don't know. It's
Well,
up
yeah,
there,
I mean,
but it's
maybe
like
not. Yeah,
Texas.
cool. It's Texas.
Shiner has billboards in Austin that say "proudly not served in 49 states."
That's so Texas. I
It's
love it.
immensely Texas. It's
Mint.
it's 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 just dripping Texas.
Well,
Dylan, best of luck to you, man. I love your work, and I'm so excited to. Can't wait for the shows to come out. DylanTownsend.com, Dylan Townsend on Instagram. I'll link all your stuff, but
thank you.
following you and supporting you and appreciating you.
Thanks so much, Bob.
Thanks,
Appreciate
brother.
you.